Blockchain Show is a podcast that demystifies cryptocurrencies and distributed ledger technology.
This is the Blockchain Show, episode number 235. Our guest today is Alexander Tkachenko, the founder and CEO of VNX. Alexander, welcome to the Blockchain Show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's my pleasure. If you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about yourself and your background, that'd be great.
Absolutely. My name is Alexander Tkachenko. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a founder and CEO of VNX. VNX is probably one of the first, if not the only platform in Europe that got regulatory approval to start tokenization of the precious metals. I got to crypto in 2017. I was running a VC fund to BLU, and I just saw this new interesting opportunities, blockchain being developed. Shortly afterwards, I thought that why don't we tokenize VC investments? This is the origin of VNX. And step by step, we got to the tokenization of the commodities or precious metals. And here I am.
Very good. You mentioned the tokenization of VC funds. Could you expand on that a little bit?
VCs is a very interesting investment, potentially yielding an interesting income for the investors. Of course, it has many other interesting aspects for the society, such as creating jobs, fostering innovations, et cetera, et cetera. So in essence, I think it's doing a lot of good for the societies, but it generates reasonable good funds, generate reasonable return for the investors. The only drawback that I saw is that you lock in capital for quite a long period of time. Therefore, if there was a possibility to make those investments a little bit more liquid, it would be nice for the investors. And at the same time, it's kind of a little bit elitish, this type of investments, since it requires sizable checks and, again, very, very long time to be in this investment. So I thought that if there was a possibility to democratize access to the investments, it would be nice. And to me, blockchain was providing a perfect medium to do that. So I started to look at different angles, how to do it, whether it's possible to do it, what's the regulatory regimes, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the story of trying to do VC investments with the help of blockchain.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And then you obviously went on to tokenizing precious metals, and it kind of reminds me of the history of money. That's how we got paper money. People holding different golden vaults, and then it became too heavy to carry the gold, and et cetera, et cetera. And now we're here to the more advanced iteration. Tell me a little bit about that origin story of how you came to that realization, and when you realized that blockchain would be a good method.
I think the aspect of tokenization is indeed a very, very correct angle. My personal feeling a little bit early in COVID was that possibly that was a little bit too early in the area of the development of the blockchain technology. And we needed something more basic, such as indeed money or gold or, the basic infrastructure for the blockchain technology to function. So rather than going directly into high-speed car chase, it was more like discussing how we can walk or crawl from the industry perspective. Therefore, it did feel that a possibility to have a transfer of value or reference of value, which is backed on something such as gold, which most people do have kind of an understanding that it's a certain reference, was important. And that's how we decided to tokenize precious metals in order to create that kind of value, kind of guide for the industry, with an idea that once the industry and technology matures, we still would like to go back and tokenize VC investments or many other things as we go along.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. They kind of walk before you can run. I understand that. Would you say it's kind of like a gold standard in crypto?
Many people say that Bitcoin is a gold standard in crypto, but I would say that looking at the volatility of Bitcoin, it's probably not there yet. Therefore, a gold standard in crypto, gold or tokenized gold can indeed be the gold standard in crypto. I think that's probably yes. We are aiming to be a gold standard in crypto.
Okay, and what would you say the importance of having a fully backed asset would be? Because most people, when they think of crypto, they don't think something in the real world. Maybe not yet.
Yes and no. On one hand, I've seen a number of the waves in the crypto industry, and everyone is in Bitcoin or the volatility when the asset prices are rising, and everyone in defensive assets when the prices are tumbling. And we're the defensive asset or the reference, so to say. Defensive assets when the market go down, or the reference, just to make sure that we are in a good kind of position. We're checking to something which has relevance outside of the crypto world. That's one aspect. The other aspect is, as the technology and as the appeal of crypto grows, there will be more and more people from the weaker financial systems that would probably want to have something more tangible, or at least connected to the world where they live in. And gold is universally understood to be a store of value. So that would actually help many more users, not crypto enthusiasts, but people who are coming actually to use blockchain and crypto for very, very basic things like saving money from inflation, or trying to save money from the plutocratic governments. And their gold, or the reference to physical gold, would actually be important. These people would have a natural tendency to look for something that they know. And I felt that this is a very interesting proposition, even for that group of investors further down the line as well.
Right, yeah. And I don't mean to get hung up on gold too much, but it's something that's interesting to me is if somebody were to purchase tokens in gold, how would that work?
Every token is backed by physical gold, which sits in Liechtenstein. One token is 1 gram. It's possible to check the bar to which your token is linked to. There's a part on the internet site called allocation lookup, and you can actually find the details of the gold bar that the token is linked to. So yes, there is physical gold which sits in Liechtenstein. Moreover, if you have 1,000 tokens, which is 1 kilogram, you can actually get a physical bar. You can order a pickup, arrange a pickup, or delivery, if delivery is possible. So yes, there's physical gold which backs every token of VNX.
This is very cool. Merging that with technology, it's just such a fascinating concept. And I can really appreciate how valuable this service is to people who are considerate of their wealth and they want to protect it and grow it and, improve their families' generations to come. So I see this as a really good method to do that. Just hope that, and people listening, maybe they could think about different options available, because I feel like crypto has a certain connotation in the world. Had 2 major rises in price, a lot of interest, and then huge crashes, and then a lot of distrust. And there's just so much more available to people if they would just kind of get over the price and get over the hype and kind of realize just how fundamentally different and paradigm shifting this technology can be. So I'm definitely excited to see where this goes. Been interested in VCs for the last couple of years. Being in California, there's quite a few. You hear about angel investors. You hear about, a lot of the big tech companies and how they were able to start up because of that. But it just seems like a great way to, I don't know if I'm saying this right, but kind of democratize our future, technologically speaking, to be able to tokenize those investments. It's something I didn't even think about. I mean, the only way I knew how to do that before would be buying stocks, but that's after the company started. That doesn't really, and it almost reminds me of a DAO a little bit, having a group of people just providing cryptocurrencies to fund projects that they believe in, but this is a little bit more nuanced. So is that something that's on hold for now, the VC tokenization, or is that still in development?
We're developing it. For sure, we're developing. The regulatory framework is quite complex. Wherever you come to the kind of financial products, that's a very, very complex regulatory regime. I think it will require a little bit more time before it actually becomes publicly available, and I think it would be tied to the development of the technology in general. When we started back 5 years ago, there was a lot of discussions of the STOs, but then it somehow got a backseat. But now I really see interest from financial industry players to the tokenization of the financial assets, and I do believe that we will be back, and for sure there will be democratization, there will be tokenization of financial products, of commodities, of many other things like real estate, art, going forward. You are totally correct. It gives a totally different angle to many markets, VC or real estate or art, because it democratizes access, because it allows a lot new users to come in. It reduces the barriers to entry, and most importantly, it allows people to access the asset classes that before were not accessible to them. So I do think that blockchain has a huge potential. It's a fantastic technology. It just develops, in stages. So again, when we're coming back to the beginning of our discussion, now the foundation is laid for the technology to take form, and then it will start to grow.
Yeah, that's very well said. On the topic of regulation, I used to not be a fan, but that might just because I live in the United States, and it seems like anytime government, particularly the federal government, gets involved, things slow down, become just a headache. Not always, but I can only imagine for a company how difficult it must be internationally navigating all these different laws. So I've got to just commend you guys for having the tenacity to weather all of that. But what's
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. What is your take on regulation in the crypto space? Do you think it has benefits, specifically for entrepreneurs and investors?
Regulation, I think, may have a different effect depending on the cycle of the development of the technology. The regulation in South Korea, for example, was pretty lax at the beginning of the crypto and blockchain development. Therefore, it allowed for the development of a very, very flourishing ecosystem. And for example, in the United States, also the regulation was really, or the regulators really kind of left alone the crypto industry, allowing it to test many hypotheses, allowing it to develop. Of course, it has a drawback. From time to time, you have bad players. But the situation evens out. However, as the industry becomes sizable and there is a significant amount of people involved, and especially not professional people, start to be involved, then the regulators move in. And it has also a double effect. One effect, it helps the industry mature and become accessible and interesting for bigger players. Let's say, crypto industry being unregulated is to some extent a taboo for banks or for traditional financial players, simply because they, as regulated players, they need to deal with within the regulatory framework or with the players of the regulatory framework. But they would also not be very interested in a very small industry. But once the size of the industry or the technology becomes of certain interest to them, the regulation helps them to access those new markets. And when the bigger players start to access the technology or this new market as blockchain or crypto, that helps the technology or players in this industry to make a quantum loop. The interest of institutional players, be it banks, exchanges, etc., the amount of resources they can commit to the technology would really transform crypto and blockchain, in my personal view, in 5 to 10 years. And that for sure requires regulation, regulatory oversight, regulatory frameworks, simply because they cannot deal with something which is unregulated. So depending on the different stages, the effect of regulation will be different. If at the very, very beginning, the regulators were to move hard on the blockchain and crypto, it would have to some extent suffocated the development. If they kind of let it be develop to a certain stage where it becomes sizable, it becomes mature, and then move in and start to impose regulation, they actually not, in my view, suffocating the industry, so to say. They make it more investable and accessible to the bigger pool of regulated players. That's how I see it. And they're actually helping the industry grow.
Something I've been wondering about lately is how can they provide regulation for something like DeFi? Certainly a lot of projects over the last 2.5, 3 years. For some people, it's a great thing. For other people, they don't know how to navigate it. And I'm sure for some, they've had heartbreak. Let's talk about that, if you wouldn't mind, the difference between DeFi versus CeFi, particularly for VC investors during this time of market downturn, I guess you could say.
I think that DeFi as a concept has a lot of potential. It really is a very, very promising area of application of blockchain technology. At the same time, I see that a combination of CeFi and DeFi is probably what would be a very, very important to drive the benefits that DeFi has to the mainstream. And in that sense, I see the amalgamation between CeFi and DeFi, i.e., parts of DeFi have been taken or used by centralized players for providing access through the centralized players to DeFi for the regulated entities, for example, is necessary for the industry to survive. In my personal view, crypto and blockchain are already at the stage where a completely decentralized, unregulated businesses are very hard to sustain. Therefore, there would need to be a certain combination between regulated and unregulated, or centralized and decentralized. And that combination would, in my view, produce very, very good results going forward. So I wouldn't oppose them. I would say that amalgamation would probably produce something really, really good out of this.
Yeah, it's a very logical approach. If we could have 100% perfection in our coding, or the developers, and no disrespect to them, what they do is amazing. We're just not quite there yet. We saw in the DAO early in Ethereum's history that didn't quite work out. People were able to exploit certain vulnerabilities. There's hacks that can still go on even in blockchains. So, there is a benefit to having centralization sometimes, in particular right now. It's not such a bad thing. I think everyone gets a little too focused on decentralization. I don't know why. Maybe it's just a big topic in the beginning days of blockchain. It's really all just collaboration and agreement between people. So
yeah, actually, it's a very, very interesting topic because decentralization is at the heart of blockchain or at the heart of crypto. And being now in Liechtenstein, which is very close to Switzerland, which is probably one of the best examples of decentralized democracies, you can see it in real life, how people self-govern, they organize referendums, etc., etc. To me, this probably represents the best kind of model for the blockchain or the decentralization, so to say, which is now being developed in the blockchain ecosystem. At the same time, there's still laws and there's still regulations, even in Switzerland, which means that's what we're discussing about the DeFi and CDeFi. You do want to have decentralization. You want to have the distributed kind of power, but at the same time, you still require certain level of regulations or certain level of rules in order to make the system function and compatible with the existing players, for example, the banks, the financial system, etc., etc. But my personal feeling is we still, the core of the idea, decentralized, distributed, is very, very strong. I'm a strong believer in it, and I would really, really support it. But what we're saying is just a little bit extending this idea so it becomes compatible to the players that are already out there. So the system becomes connected to the world, to the current financial world, to the current regulations.
yeah, it's very interesting. I've got very limited experience in Europe, but the little bit amount of time that I had there just kind of opened my eyes to just the history of Western culture. I think growing up in America, people tend to get a little bit tunnel vision. Our oldest cities are not that old. They have trees in Europe older than our oldest cities, but well, I guess we have old trees here too. But anyways, it's that tradition of collaboration and agreement and the evolution of cultures and the changes and the wars. There's just so much there that I think most Americans don't grow up with. So when they are developing projects, when they're coming up with white papers, it's a different mindset, and I think there's this need to progress at the cost of maybe not thinking about not only the rest of the world, but what's in the best interest of every person on the planet. Just different ways to go about it, if that makes sense. It's been really interesting talking with people all over the world. It seems like as time goes on, you're right, more and more of these older systems are kind of becoming integrated, and there has to be agreement. It almost reminds me of typing a letter on a typewriter and then putting it in a fax machine. It's like you could do that, or you could also send an email. We'll accept both for now, depending on what kind of technology you have. I don't know. That's a terrible example.
But it's a very, very good analogy. I think blockchain technology per se is indeed at the stage where, my personal view, we're still, compared to the internet days, probably 93, 94, 95. So we're very, very early. So we're still at the time when there were typewriters and faxes, etc., etc. But indeed, we see that where internet took us is that we're all communicating with email, we're using messengers, we're using video conferences, and the blockchain technology in 10, 15 years would allow a totally new, maybe even unknown at the moment, not even, but totally unknown things to flourish, to become very useful, and people in 15, 20 years will be so accustomed to it, like we are to the video conference, etc. So I think it's a very, very good analogy. It just gives you a reference, or me a reference, to where we are in terms of the age of the development of the blockchain technology. It's just important to know that even though it seems that 10 years is long, but it's really Bitcoin, the idea, or the lightning which sparked the interest to the crypto and the blockchain, etc., etc. It's literally 10, 12 years old. So we still need some more time. And it's happening now when the technology is maturing, when the use cases are becoming, more kind of pronounced, and more and more people start to accept it, start to build it. The regulation comes into play, and you already start to have projects like ours that can accept institutional investors, that can work with institutional investors, et cetera, that understand what is KYC AML, have very strict regimes of KYC AML. I think we're getting there, but we're still very early at the kind of in the history or at the stage of the development of the industry. But for sure, we're moving in the right direction, in my personal view.
Normally, I don't take this viewpoint, but for some reason, this conversation has got some things turning in my mind. But you're right. I mean, there is a lot of interesting projects being developed right now, a lot of use cases that 10 years ago we wouldn't have thought about. I guess you'd call them unknown unknowns. Now they're somewhat knowns. We've got known unknowns. And it almost kind of reminds me, like, I remember, I think it was like 1995 or 1996, I saw like a video conferencing web application for the first time. And it barely worked. Just the bandwidth wasn't there. But something clicked in my head like, oh, wow, you can see people and talk. And this is like the Jetsons. You grow up thinking that one day we're going to see each other and talk. And then someone makes it and it's like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. And then it's no longer this mystical thing. It's just, it doesn't work. It's janky. I'm going to use the phone. Like, who needs this kind of thing? And then another 15 years, everyone's using it. So I think, you name it, any industry. And we've talked to lawyers, we've talked to doctors, tax people. Voting's definitely something that interests me. But the financial aspect it's the original use case. It's very real. And that's why when, people have wealth, it's something you got to be careful with it. And a lot of the ways of managing different crypto coins, it's very high stakes. If you lose your keys, you lose your fortune. So I definitely understand people's apprehension to want to get involved in different projects. It's good to diversify for sure. But this has been a really kind of thought-provoking to look into how that might be for some people going forward. So I appreciate you taking the time to explain all this to me and the audience. I know we've got a little bit of time left. If you'd like to share anything to leave us with in closing, where people can go to learn more, I really just kind of want to give you the floor here.
Thank you. In my personal view, we are probably at one of the best stages of the development of the blockchain technology. Sufficient amount of people has been interested, has learned about crypto, have had experience with crypto. At the same time, the hype somehow has gone. Therefore, you really see now the projects that are really solving the issues, and those who would survive the next 2-3 years, those that would get funded, would become the next Amazons, would become the next Googles, etc. So in my personal view, now is probably one of the best and really important times of the development of the industry. I will do my best, and I really hope that VNX would become one of the cornerstones of the not only European but international development of the blockchain industry. At least this is my aim and my goal. But at the same time, I think it's the best time to start companies in blockchain. It's very, very difficult. For sure, it's difficult. But those with good ideas, those that see the fundamental need to apply this technology to something real, would get funded. Of course, the amount of funding has substantially decreased, but those who would start the companies now would get funding and will deliver their products in 2-3 years, or couple of years or a year and a half, depending on how fast they work, would be in a very, very good position to catch a much bigger third wave that would be coming with a mass adoption, institutionals, moving into the space, etc., etc. Therefore, with all the troubles in the world, with all the troubles in the financial system, inflation, etc., etc., I do think that blockchain presents probably one of the greatest opportunities midterm, and I would really encourage listeners, those who are interested to start their companies, to develop new products, to actually look at the technology, to start something new, and of course, potentially use VNX products in their developments. I would be very, very happy that if that happens.
So where can people go if say they do want to slowly start accumulating some gold?
They can register at our platform, www.vnx.io. We are also being gradually listed on crypto exchanges. So they can either buy directly at VNX or eventually at one of the crypto exchanges, and then start their investment strategies, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah, that's really, really awesome. I say slowly for myself. I'm sure there's other people out there in a much better position who can quickly accumulate. I really enjoyed talking with you today. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. I wish you all the best, and I definitely look forward to following what you guys will be soon to be releasing in the not too distant future. So thank you again.
Thank you very much, Ethan. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
Okay.